the show.
Today we're going to be talking with Rachel Allen from Empire Industries. We're going to be talking about investing both here and in New Orleans, how she has dealt with hurricanes in the past, all today on the Landlord Survival Show.
This is the Landlord Survival Show. When people stop being nice and shit gets real. You're the landlord. We're here to help. This is a show for what the gurus don't tell you about owning rentals. We're here for you because we're stronger together.
Brought to you by Empire Industries Property Management, built for investors, by investors. For more information about this show, please visit our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com, home of the ultimate Landlord Survival Handbook.
Now, the Landlord Survival Show with your host, Steve Rosenberg.
Hey everyone, happy Tuesday to you. This is the Landlord Survival Show. Everyone's kind of recovering from the Hurricane Florence aftermath, and hope everyone's safe, everyone's doing okay. We're going to talk a little bit about that today with our guest as investors and how investors kind of dig in and start helping fix some of these challenges that Mother Nature throws on us. First, let me talk a little bit about the show, Landlord Survival Show. We are here for investors, by investors. The reason that I created this show is because I think a lot of people out there want to know the secrets to buying real estate and getting wealthy. And I think the reality is that there are no secrets. The secret is constant attention and focus to detail and staying in your lane and picking a goal and seeing that goal till the end. And I think a lot of us, sometimes when we're buying properties and getting into this, we see the shiny objects, the fancy cars. We see the people that are making all this Facebook money, and we want that. And we don't really know how that happens. We don't know how to get on the Ferris wheel. We just want to get on it and ride the ride, and no one really tells you. And unfortunately, they tell you how to get the deals. They don't really tell you how to keep the deals. And that's where we come in, because what we've learned is getting a deal is easy. Making the money out of it for the next 5, 10, 20, or 30 years, which is why you even bought the property, is where it gets hard. And nobody really teaches you those things. One of the things Pete and I did, my business partner, is we created the Landlord Survival Handbook. That is a book that we created for investors to teach them how we manage almost 1,000 properties every day, from selecting a tenant to getting a property ready to understanding fair housing laws, basically all the things that you don't deal with on a daily basis that you may hit once a year, maybe once every 3 years. We made a reference guide for you. So if you want to go to our website, you can take a look at it. It's selfmanagemyproperty.com. Again, selfmanagemyproperty.com. You can go on there, you can look on there, or you can go to our Facebook group, Landlord Survival Facebook group, and go there, join. It's just a lot of investors. No one is allowed to sell anything on there because I don't want anything sold. I just want it where investors can help other investors, because I'm tired of seeing people rip other people off for their own gain and not giving any value back to the industry. And unfortunately, I was one of those people that I wouldn't say I got taken advantage of, because I let it happen to me. But at the end of the day, I paid for something and didn't get anything back. So call it what you want. I got screwed over, basically. So I have a very special guest today, and we're going to talk a little bit to her. She has been with our property management company for, how long have you been with us, Rachel?
Almost 3 years.
3 years, wow.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
It does fly, yeah. Holy moly. So you've been with us 3 years, and I think that you are one of the rare people that have probably sat in every position in the company: property manager, BDM, marketing person, and realtor the whole time on the back end. So congratulations. If we had an award, we would give that to you.
I'm working on owner next.
The owner, there you go. Hey, I'll give it to you. I'd love to see it. So today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what you do, your experience. You come with a lot of credentials and a lot of back ends, in the sense that not only are you an investor, but you know the property management world. You know the selling world, especially, I worked with you a lot on the BDM side as well. And you know about owning properties local and out of state, and working with investors, because you work with a lot of investors. Mm-hmm. So tell everyone just a little bit about yourself, kind of what you do, and then we'll kind of dig in from there.
Okay. Well, I think my journey initially started as wanting to become an investor. You see, like you mentioned, all the shiny things you can have.
The rock stars, man. Yeah. Facebook rock stardom.
I think this was kind of before Facebook became what Facebook was, but...
You're dating yourself. Careful.
So I just wanted, it just seemed like that was the avenue to financial freedom. And so I started exploring, started going to the seminars. I got sold into all of those different gimmicks. And I think one of the most important things I learned was just to act. And so several times, as scared as I was, I just acted, bought a property, didn't know what to do with it, failed a couple of times. And so once I got into real estate investing, I figured, okay, well, I need access to the MLS. And so I got my real estate license. This was back in maybe 2009 in Louisiana. And so all while working full-time jobs, was a part-time realtor, investor, did a couple of flips, held a couple of rental properties, moved to Houston and became a full-time real estate agent, and found my way to Empire Industries, where I did a little bit of property management as a property manager. So again, I've worked pretty much every avenue of the business.
And I think actually you saw me speak at a realtor office, and that's when you first found out about us, right?
Yeah, I started off with Keller Williams,
that's
and
right.
I was there for a little while. And Empire was the partnership sponsor for property management, because our broker didn't allow us to manage properties for our clients.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of agents, they don't understand property management, but if you think about it, well, they don't understand the whole investing world. Mm-hmm. But what a lot of agents don't understand is typically 33% of a city rents. Now, you get to cities like New York, it's more like in the 60 percentile. But if you think of 33% of Houston that rents, that means investors own 33% of the city. That is a lot of money that agents are basically pushing aside because of ignorance, because they're choosing not to learn, because it works, it happens every day. And the interesting thing about investors is they don't hold the property mostly like a retail end buyer does, where a buyer may buy one house, maybe a second house, maybe a third over the course, but that's pretty much it. They don't buy many houses. Where you get investors that, they own on average of 3 to 5 properties, and they turn those over multiple times. So the lifetime acquisition of that client as an agent, it just makes so much more sense.
It makes so much more sense. I have clients that have purchased probably 7 to 8, 9 houses with me.
Right.
And of course, investors, they hang out with other investors. And so it's a huge source of referrals. So
yeah, it's huge. And investors, if you don't know of other people, I would encourage you, go to these local investing groups. I mean, I think in Houston, you could probably go to 2 a day and eat breakfast and lunch at all these freebies, and you learn something, lots of drinks. It's all free. You meet a lot of people. As a matter of fact, next week we have our owner education series at Empire. It's going to be at the Marriott on the 26th, and I'm going to be talking about how to understand and mentally change your mindset to be an investor. We're going to have Noble Mortgage there and Sena House Buyers. Now, let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier that, you took that leap when you were was it New Orleans you were in? Mm-hmm. So when you're in New Orleans and you kind of took that leap not knowing, did you have people telling you don't do it? Like, did you get that, first of all, that negative you're going to fail, or were people just kind of, were they encouraging you? What was the reception? Because you went from a regular job to saying, I think I'm going to get into this. What were people telling you?
I can't recall ever being told like I can't, or getting, any kind of negative feedback or criticism about just moving forward. It was more of, okay, we'll see how this goes. you know?
Well, I think what a lot of people do is they don't want to tell you don't do it, because they don't want to seem like that kind of prick that says, hey, you're going to fail, because then if you don't, then you throw it in their face. I think what they want to do is they kind of want to put their arm around your shoulder and be like, let me give you some advice. Like, let me just, there's a lot of things you don't know about it. Of course, what's funny is most of these people have never done anything themselves, but they want to give you that encouraging advice that, and I've had it with me many, many times. And when I got into real estate, I didn't know anything about it, and I just started doing it and doing it and doing it. By the time I was successful at it, that's when I had people actually come up to me and tell me I couldn't do it. And I was thinking, well, that's kind of weird, because I just did it for the last 2 years and it seemed to work for me. But okay, I'll go with your answer, but I don't see why. And I think a lot of people, they give you that advice because I think deep down I don't think they like to see you succeed as much as they want to see you fail, so that they don't have to say maybe they should do it.
Yeah.
And
I think that's one of the things that when you talk about mindset, and one of the most important things is look at your circle. If people are telling you that you can't and that you won't, then you need to find another circle.
If you're the smartest one in your group, you need to change groups. Absolutely. So let me ask you a question. When you did your first flip, and you told me you have another one that you just finished, I want to talk about, but what did you learn from the first and second flip that you did? Because there's a sharp learning curve of the law of welcome to the real world that pops in these types of flips.
It's funny you say that, because I think some of the lessons, my first flip that I took on was in 2011 in New Orleans. And some of the lessons that I learned then, I'm revisiting them now.
Post-flood type lessons, or just in general?
I think they're more in general. And because I'm not a contractor myself,
right.
Like, I think that's one of the biggest challenges when you're flipping. People, they watch HGTV and they think, oh, this is so easy. We could just...
I need a film crew. Where's my film crew? Where's my posse to roll around with me?
Yeah, we might run into some issues, but they're going to be resolved. And,
By commercial.
By
commercial, you get them resolved.
Commercial. So I think one of the biggest challenges in flipping is realizing it's a full-time job. If
Absolutely.
you can't dedicate going to the site every day, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.
It's funny you say that, because it's just like investing, right? When I speak on investing, or I talk to people, I talk to a lot of single-family landlords, and I'll ask them, do we agree that investing is a business? Because you have profit, you have loss, you have income, expenses, you have every government agency alphabet that's watching you, IRS, Fair Housing, Texas Property Code, TREC, everyone's watching the investor. So they agree that they're a business. And then of that group that has their hands raised, I'll say, now keep your hands up if you have a business plan to go with your business. And maybe one or two may keep their hands up. And I say, so do you see the disassociation here with what you realize it's a business? You need to have a business plan. We all know that, but yet you're not doing it. And then you wonder why you fail as an investor. Same thing with flipping. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people don't do this, and it's hard to do this, but you need to have a business plan when you're flipping a property. Some form of plan, right? You got to have a plan of action.
Schedule, you have the timeline, you have to have contingencies, you got to have money.
You got to have money, yeah. You got to have tolerance. You got to have the what if they don't show, scenarios. So what were some things that you did learn on those, like that when you were in the heat of battle learning these things? Sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose, but what did you learn from those that you could share with other people that want to get involved in flipping?
I think, find a good contractor, and, don't just pick the first person, and interview them like they are going to be your employee, because many contractors, they'll talk a good game in the beginning. Know what you're looking at when you're creating your plan. I think it's really important to understand all that goes into a rehab flip, not just the pretty stuff that goes on the wall, the flooring, the end design. But, you need to understand what's behind the walls. And it's not that you have to, have this degree in construction to do it, but it is a really good idea to have some background knowledge, or have someone that you can talk to, to kind of bounce things off, someone that you trust, even if they're not there to keep like a contractor in line, but just so you're not being taken advantage of. I think especially as a female in this industry, it's I feel like a lot of times contractors may not, I know more than what they may think I know.
What I always find funny with contractors is they're such good talkers in the initial phases, but then as time goes on, it's like their vocabulary shrinks, and then they can't talk as well, and then they kind of just disappear. They don't even answer their phone, but it's like they start off really big, and then they kind of shrink down. I always wonder I always wonder if there's like a coffee stand that they all hang out at during the day, kind of where are you supposed to be today? Well, I'm supposed to be in the north side. Where are you supposed to be? And they kind of have a good laugh, where they're all the places they're supposed to be. But I think in all seriousness, I think one of the challenges that a lot of investors have is they don't set those expectations with the contractor. They almost feel grateful that the contractor is helping them because the contractor says, I can help you and I'm the best at this. People take them at their word. They don't check references. They don't verify information. they don't set up expectations of timelines, you know? And I mean, did you do this in the beginning, or were you kind of a victim of this also?
I learned from the first flip to the last flip. And I think even with the last flip, sometimes things get off schedule, you know, things change. So being able to be flexible and, you know, change your plans when things don't go as planned is really important. You know, I just wanted to bring up this point as well, is when you are talking to contractors, pay attention to their communication and how they communication and how they answer their phones and how quickly they
Sure.
get back to you. Because I think early on, if you see signs of someone who isn't communicating well, then find someone else immediately, because you need somebody who's going to answer their phone when things are going wrong.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, in the property management world, when we get a vendor, then they say, well, I don't do invoices and I need to be paid as soon as the job's done. And these are all red flags that are popping, right? And
Or
you know,
I need 50% up front.
I need money up front because I need to pay for supplies. And when they're saying that, they're telling me that they can't run their business and they can't afford to operate. So basically they need me to fund their operation, which it's kind of like, once you do your job, then I will pay you for your work. You know, it's like when I go to a restaurant, I don't pay half up front. You know, I don't pay, you know, I'll give you the money to go buy the food and then you can cook it and then I'll pay you the rest.
Right.
But for some reason that has become the norm with some of these smaller operators. And I think to myself, like you said, if they're not running their business, if they say, oh, I only talk through text and I only this, and you know, these are all red flags that I think as investors, you need to look at and go, okay, is this going to be my problem in the future once I give them that money?
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. And unfortunately, I haven't been completely burned by a contractor before.
Right.
But that is some horror stories that you hear. You get 50% up front and then nothing happens.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, you know, some contractors will require a little bit up front just because it's about trust.
Sure.
You know, you want to establish some trust. So it's like, all right, I'll give you some to get started.
Seed money, kind of.
Seed money, but not 50%, not even 30%, like maybe 10%, something. And then have a timeline planned out of, okay, once you hit this milestone, then you'll get paid more just to keep it rolling. And then you'll finish and we'll hold back 10% to pay you the final, just to make sure you get the job done. Because I find that around that last punch list, that's where everybody
That's
disappears.
where they kind of fall off. They kind of trickle away.
Wait a second.
Yeah. So, okay, let me ask you this. So you were getting into the industry post Hurricane Katrina, right? Was it Katrina that or was it?
Yeah, Hurricane Katrina.
Is that when did you deal with any flooding? Because you just said you finished a flip here that was flooded. So I'm curious, was there any correlation? Because then I want to hear about your flipping here. Was it all pretty much done in New Orleans when you got into it?
It was about, let's see, maybe 4 years later after the storm. There was still plenty of rebuilding to be done.
So there was still stuff that had to be redone.
There's still stuff now.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, are these houses just basically you got to demo them? I mean,
No, not necessarily. You know, the area of town, which is called New Orleans East, it was an area that flourished at one point in time. The flood completely wiped out, 6, 7, 8 feet of water. Most of it has been rebuilt, but I think the house that it was my grandmother's house, we rehabbed. The house next door it probably is still vacant and boarded up. Because the neighbor, so many people have such sentimental attachments to their homes. They don't want to get rid of it.
Generational, a lot of it, right?
Some of it, yeah. And I know for my neighbor next door, we wanted to purchase it, but it was like, oh, well, we're still attached to it. We want to give it to our kids. We're going to do something with it one day.
Right.
And, it's things like that actually harm the redevelopment of
absolutely.
certain areas.
The emotions get in the way of logic, kind of.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so it's paying taxes on it. It's a huge liability if you don't have the proper insurance. And there's still some things to be done out there.
So let me ask you this: since we just had the Hurricane Florence that rolled through, and I know we have some listeners, up on the East Coast, what advice would you give them on the post cleanup side of things, right? Because and obviously we had Hurricane Harvey, so you had a lot of experience with that. What are your thoughts on that from immediately after to even a year or two after?
I think if it's something that you want to get into, don't be afraid to act and understand your own market. I think that flooded homes, there will always, I think with seeing what happened with Katrina or Harvey, it's always like, ooh, should we buy? We're not sure if it's going to come back. We don't know. But It will.
Yeah.
It will. Don't hesitate.
Absolutely.
Especially you'll find the best deals in the first few weeks following.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true.
And also keep in mind too, whenever you're redoing a home, do it the right way. I think
Spend the money, invest the money,
Spend the
not
money.
spend it, invest it. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're rehabbing, spend it on the right things. Like if you have to get mold remediation done,
Get it done.
Get it done.
Yeah.
Don't. It can be expensive, but just get it done because you don't want those issues in the long run.
Absolutely. I bought a house from I got them from Senate House buyers that had flooded in Humble area, and it was a flip for them, or it would be a flip. It was not.
It's kind of a
completely
flip and
redone.
hold.
Yeah, I don't know what you'd call it for them, but anyways, good bunch of guys. Anyways, I bought it from them, and it had already been stripped down to the studs downstairs, which had flooded. So, just putting numbers to it, the house was worth, pre-flood, it was worth about 160, let's say. I bought it for 92, put about 25 into it. So now, in my mind, I have a brand new house for about $125, let's say. That was at one time worth 160. I don't think it's worth that now until the market comes back. But like you said, it's going to come back.
It's going to come back. And yes, be prepared that it will probably maybe be a year or 2 years
Absolutely.
before the stigma goes away.
Right.
So I think here in what we're seeing a lot from Harvey is a lot of buying and holding
Yes.
with the plans to sell it.
Yeah.
In the next, maybe it's already been a year.
It's already been, I know. And one of the things that I've learned, and I've seen this is, and I don't know about Hurricane Florence, but I know with Hurricane Harvey, is that a lot of properties, during Harvey that were not in flood zones, they were not rentals, that they flooded. And what that has done, I've been talking to a lot of people that have these upper end houses, let's say $400,000 or $500,000 homes. They cannot sell these houses because their house did not flood. But let's say a house a couple subdivisions over was a nice house, $400,000 or $500,000 worth, flooded. An investor came in, bought it for $200,000, put $100,000 into it. So now they're $300,000 into this. They could sell it for a quick $350,000, and they're way undercutting the market. So these people that, I hate to say it, but because their house didn't flood, they're at a disadvantage. And that's kind of the other repercussions of it takes maybe that's and I don't know the cycle of flooded houses, but this is like one portion of the cycle that is causing a lot of homeowners can't sell their houses on the upper end because a house was flooded, got insurance money, they walked away, an investor came and rebuilt it, and so it's all changed.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you do have a flood stigma, which is starting to fade. It's starting to go away. But you also have these homes in these older neighborhoods that have been completely redone. So new roof, new AC.
They're brand new houses
new
now.
electrical. It's a brand new house. It's aesthetically, well designed. And you're going to start seeing that as competition.
My guest last week, Juan Cristales, was telling me that he was still walking properties that have been flooded that haven't been touched. And I was like, that I thought, to me, I mean, it just... Not that I'm basing it on anything, but I thought it was just amazing that there's still houses out there that haven't been touched yet.
Oh, I have a client who recently purchased a property on wholesale and hadn't been remediated. And this was maybe 3 or 4 months ago.
Really?
So
what happens with that? Do they have to go through and just get the mold remediation done, just spend the money?
That's what she's doing now, is basically just opening it up, airing it out, getting a mold consultant to let her know exactly what needs to be done. Then you do that work and hope that it passed the test. So, but that gives any purchaser or renter peace of mind when you have that certificate that says this is mold free. This was done correctly.
Right. And now does that affect insurance if you have a property that has mold but you got the certificate? Does that help you at all? Is it more litigious for lawsuits? Like how does that help you? Do you know?
I think it's better to have it than to not.
Well, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, does it, like, if the mold comes back down the road, who's responsible for that? Does the owner have any repercussions to the...
Probably to some extent. I think once an investigation is done, it depends on where, is it new mold? Is it old mold?
Yeah, and where did it stem from?
Yeah. And then if you have a certificate, I would imagine you could probably use that to some extent.
And the reason I asked that is I was looking at a house that it had mold between the Tyvek and the Hardy plank.
Oh.
And they were basically going to have to rip off all the Hardy plank and replace that all, which was going to be an extra $30,000, which wasn't, planned. And I thought, now, of course, for the right price, you can fix anything, right? And if you negotiate the right price on the buy, it's fine. And that doesn't scare me. But the fact that it was not accounted for and they didn't realize it till after, then it was like, okay, this may not be a good deal for me because I don't have the crews to do it. So I'm going to have to pay someone to do it. And that's going to be added cost. So all of a sudden, it financially turns into not such a great deal.
Yeah. And I'm curious as to what's going to happen in these next few months as things start to progress, time passes, because what you saw with a lot of flood homes, they left that moisture barrier up against the brick or the exterior. You don't know what was behind that. And sometimes the walls went up before anybody knew or could say anything or do anything.
And that mold, I mean, when it rolls through, I mean, it doesn't stop, and nothing stops it, and it's a problem, and
it doesn't go away.
No, and it doesn't go away. And I'm just curious. I mean, I know they have the mold remediation, all that stuff, and I don't know if insurance covers that or how that works. If the house was in fact flooded at one time, I'm not sure how that works. So you just did a flip, right?
My husband and I.
Where'd you do it at?
We did it. It's a neighborhood called Briar Hills, so it's Energy Corridor. It's actually right off of the Bayou, Buffalo Bayou. It's on the southern side of the bayou. So on the north side, you have Memorial.
Right. Okay. Now, and you and your husband do this. Now, do you do this for other people, or is this you guys do this just for yourselves, your company?
We are flipping just for ourselves.
Just for yourselves. Okay. And so, is this something you guys are getting into, or you've been doing it kind of dabbling a little bit, right? With
I've been
else?
dabbling, and so this is the first project that we've done here in Houston.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell us about that. How did that one go?
That one almost happened by accident. We were wanting to kind of stay away from flooded homes, actually.
Yeah. I know the feeling. I ended up with one.
And it was just one of those too good to be true deals that we came across. A wholesaler sent it out, and, just looking at the numbers, it just made sense. And so, one of the things that I will say that I took away from those seminars, it's ready, fire, aim.
Yeah, very true.
Sometimes you just have to act because it looks so good. And we did that. And I think some of the challenges were that we didn't fully consider when we were doing the renovation was, Harvey hit. So labor costs and just being able to keep a contractor or subcontractor's attention for more than 5 minutes was really tough. Supplies were sometimes hard to get to. And so I think this flip took a little bit longer because of that, just getting started. This particular property, it flooded from the release of water.
Okay. I was going to ask you that, if that's how it flooded.
From the reservoir. So it's in a 500-year floodplain. But it hadn't flooded before because it literally backs up to the bayou.
So for the people that don't know, in Houston there was these flood basins, and they didn't flood because of Hurricane Harvey, but the flood basins filled up. So then the city had to release the flood basin, which flooded houses. So that was
they wanted to do a controlled release so it wouldn't affect as much of the city. Picture when the levees broke in. Katrina. So, I mean, it obviously it sucked for the people that survived the hurricane, and then they were told basically they're going to flood their houses. Yeah,
so
I mean, you knew it was going to happen.
You knew it was coming, yeah. That was a bad deal. So, I mean, yes, it could happen again. Now, do you have to get flood insurance because of where you are in that flood basin?
Yeah, I mean, I would not get it.
Absolutely.
It's not really ridiculously expensive because it's not in a 100-year floodplain. Right. But yeah, I mean, I would not ever get it.
Yeah, it's a given.
I think if you're not in a floodplain, you should still have
absolutely. So insurance. Okay, so did you have a different strategy going into this one, knowing that this is a flooded house, it's been flooded? Now, how long have you guys had it for? Like, when did you guys take possession of it and all that?
Around the top of the year, so around January.
Okay, so about 4 or 5 months after. So, okay.
But we didn't really get started because we were actually working on another house that we live in now. So we were renovating a house that we were moving into, and so we actually didn't fully get started on this one until maybe about March, April.
Okay. And so when you started that, did you have a different strategy for this one than the others, or, because it was a flooded house as far as contractors and stuff? Did you allot more funds or time for this?
Yeah, I think for our strategy for this one, because it was, you always have to know your market and know what needs to go into it. You don't want to buy a property, a $300,000, $400,000 home and put rental grade materials into it. One of the things that I knew we needed to do with it being a flooded home was, one, check the foundation to make sure that was solid before we started putting up sheetrock. Two, we wanted to make sure we had the mold remediation. That was
certificate.
The certificate.
Did it have any flood mold or?
No, so Harvey happened in maybe August. We bought it like around, 3 months later is when we purchased it, but it had been completely sheetrock ripped out. There was no visible signs of mold, but, it was brick and frame closed in. And so, of course, there were some humid months, but what we did was
Houston tends to have those.
A couple of days. But it was dried out. It had been drying out for a fairly decent amount of time. Sure. But we sprayed it down with the chemicals, and then our water restoration specialist, he sprayed this type of paint that prevents any type of mold growth through the stud. So if there was something there, it would be stuck with it. It wouldn't grow out.
So when it came to getting contractors, how did you, what was that like? Because I don't even know. Everybody had a contractor sign on their car after a hurricane. Everyone was a roofer or a plumber or something. So, but what's funny is there were so many of them, but there was so much work, you couldn't get a hold of any of them.
You couldn't tie anyone down, and I think that completely messed with our schedule. And so what ended up happening when we got an original bid, which was just kind of, it wasn't a contractor bid, just kind of like based on what we knew. Our bid, we underbid, one, because the property needed more foundation work than we originally anticipated. It seemed like a perfectly fine house, but I actually had a couple of different foundation companies telling me different things, like, you need to lift on this side or this side.
Not even the same story, huh?
Not even the same story. I use a third-party foundation specialist.
Like someone just break the tie.
Yeah, I was like, what do I do? And so I battled over this. It must have been weeks just trying to decide, who do I trust? Who do I go with? Yeah. And so I went with the foundation company that almost guaranteed their work. They did a structural, they gave me a structural certificate from a structural engineer saying this is solid, and guarantee that if it didn't pass inspection, they would correct it.
Now, was it because of the flood that the foundation split?
I don't know if it was because of that, but I do know that it's very common.
Maybe accelerated it, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes what I learned is that, with the flood hitting, it's really important to check the foundation, because there may have been some foundation issues to start with. I just know in these neighborhoods within Houston, everything shifts.
Sure, and the soil is it's not the best soil to build on in general. It was a swamp at one point. So
right. That. So even if it hadn't flooded, it probably needed some foundation work to some extent. Gotcha. So before we put it back together, we wanted to make sure we had that.
So you got that, and then getting the contractors, did you get the original contractor that was going to rehab the house? Is that the guy you went with, or?
No, so Shocker. The contractor actually ended up being me.
Oh, really? So you were the contractor, okay.
I did it. I never want to do that again.
Yeah, that's a tough role. Is it because you just couldn't find anyone? Or?
I couldn't. Part of it was because I couldn't find anyone.
You're not a control freak.
Another part was I couldn't find anyone that would come within my budget.
Well, yeah, that's true. You got holding costs, right? You got, and then obviously a higher foundation cost. So you allocate so much money.
Yeah. And so instead of paying that 20% to the contractor.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. Okay. So along those lines, would you revise your numbers the next flip you do to maybe add in more of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I understand a little bit better what to look for. And, I think next time I for sure will hire a contractor instead of trying to do it myself. Yeah. Because what I really need to look at now is, when you take time versus money spent, did I end up
coming out
ahead or not, because I think one of the challenges not being a contractor myself and having these regular crews that just work like clockwork, I had some scheduling troubles, and so it took longer than I wanted it.
What was your estimated time, and what did it take?
I estimated it would take about 4 months. So let's say April, May, June, July. I really wanted it to be done around like July, August. I wanted it to be on the market before August, and now we're September, so we're probably about a month behind. Okay.
So let me ask you this: as you now, obviously, you have a contractor's knowledge history. So before you got your degree in contracting, did you?
Doesn't take much, I promise.
No, I get that. Now, did you run into any challenges that you weren't expecting? Like all of a sudden, it was like, oh shit, how am I going to handle this? Or didn't think about this coming up, or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all over the place.
Day one, like, just showing up?
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, this foundation issue. Yes. So I initially, one of the things you try to save money. So on the ACs, yes, they took some water. But what I was hearing is that you can replace certain components within like a condenser that may have had some water, and it'll work. Well, we did that. We paid money to repair. Patch. It ended up dying anyway, so I had to replace the ACs.
I guess water, that's the biggest, I've always heard water is the biggest damaging thing that exists. So when water gets in anything, it's kind of I don't even know if it's 50-50, maybe 80-20 that it's not going to work.
Yeah, it may have been better just to have it replaced, but you're looking at your budget and you're like, okay, where can I save?
Yeah.
Where can I save? So, but I ended up spending more,
in the long run. Yeah. Okay. So you had the AC. What other things did you come across that people can think about when they're doing a rehab?
I think electrical is the same kind of idea, depending on how much water was taken in. So, we didn't replace all of the electrical, but we repaired a significant amount of it. We did replace the panel, but I know that there are the neighbors next to us, they didn't replace their panel. So I don't know what kind of issues you may see with that long term. But, if you have an outdated home, you might as well do some upgrades while the walls are open.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I think, I think about that on the resale. I can say electricals, update,
right.
Plumbing,
there's value there.
New ACs.
Absolutely.
Foundation.
Otherwise, you're saying, well, we patched it, we fixed it, and they're going to go, well, I'm paying top dollar for this. I want it replaced.
Exactly. So our goal, actually, with this home, we're going to be selling it price per square foot. I don't want to say significantly under what market value is, but we know that we need to price it less than market value.
So is this because you can, or because you want to sell it quicker? Or
I want to get out of it.
You just want to get out of it and keep going, right?
I want to get out of it.
Because you want your money to be moving for you.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask this: did you have any things that happened that you couldn't solve, like that you just kind of could not figure out that maybe? Whether it was funding, whether it was finding obviously you found the deal. You're an agent. But was there anything along the way that you kind of thought, man, I just cannot freaking figure this one out?
There were a lot of things along the way. I think I found solutions to most of them. I'm still working on some of those solutions right now. One of, when you have a home, you get foundation work done, especially an older home, everything becomes unsquare in the house. And so you're trying to figure out how to fit cabinets so that they're level, how to put a shower door in so that it's level and doesn't leak. And so those were some challenges along the way. Fortunately, I don't know what it was, but I was able to find the people that were really great at problem solving.
Edges, 90-degree angles.
At figuring those things out.
So what do you think the biggest lesson you learned from this whole flip? Because hopefully you've look, failing, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you learn the lesson. So what were some of the lessons, and what was the biggest one you think?
Timing, especially being your own contractor, and even if you're not your own contractor, just having a schedule in place and sticking to it and holding whoever's responsible for the schedule accountable. Because, as they say, time is money. And so where we are right now, we're going into some of the slower months. Ideally, you want to list a property between, May before August,
right.
Because a lot of the market fluctuates fluctuates with school,
It's cyclical.
that timing of schools. So
Yeah.
that's why the market is so hot in the summertime, because that's
Yep.
when people want to
Everyone's
move
moving.
and transition. So we missed that mark a little bit. It doesn't mean that it won't sell, especially if it's priced right, because that's what's most important. But understanding your costs, which you either have to rely on a contractor to give you that information and hold them to that budget that they promise you, or you just have to have a pretty good idea of what things cost.
So, okay, is there, can people get a pricing sheet on what things cost, or how does that, you just kind of, I guess if you have 4 contractors telling you the same price, you go, okay, it's probably about that much.
It's probably right, but you'll see that things are all over the place, because the way that some contractors, they'll price something way higher in one area but way lower in another, just depending on what they know their margins are.
That makes sense.
Some contractors have in-house, carpentry, and so they don't, they pay hourly wages, and so they can do it for much cheaper than what they have to subcontract out.
Right.
So everybody's different, and the more you see prices, you can get an average and better understand.
You would know more, especially with Empire and all that. You kind of have a better gauge of if this person's full of it or not. you
Right.
know.
And if you're unsure, get multiple bids. But then, there's also quality versus
Sure. And time. How long does it take you to, because you've got to drive down there, and every time it's like, okay, you know what? I just need to freaking get this done. I got to get, and I'm sure at some point, there were some things you were like, just do it. I just want it done,
Yeah.
you're tired of going down there, you're tired of meeting them, all
Just
that
do it,
stuff.
yeah.
Just get it done.
That becomes.
So was the 20%, I guess here's the
That's
question.
what,
Was
I'll come
it
back
worth
and
it?
let you know.
Yeah, I guess you'll know, I guess,
I don't know. Exactly. We'll
Yeah,
see.
because then you go, okay, if I had a contractor in a perfect world and they got it done in July and I was able to sell it and get my money turned quicker, was that worth the
Was that worth
20%? And that's what you got to ask yourself. Now, you guys, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing I did, it makes me feel better, at least, is saying that some of this is the cost of education. So
Absolutely.
I got
No,
a
you're
hell of
right.
a lot of experience
you wouldn't
out of
know for the next one. You wouldn't know unless you run into these challenges. Let me ask you this: what do you think as you do this? Whether it's this or anything, what's your biggest fear when you buy a deal?
That you'll end up
Stuck with
upside
it?
down.
Or upside down
more
and not
than
losing
anything.
money?
Yeah, there's always a way to get rid of it, but
Yeah.
sometimes you're upside down trying to get rid of it.
Well, and what's interesting is, and Pete and I, our story of buying a bunch of bad properties and, having to come to closing with money. And, we were actually the happiest people because it wasn't our problem anymore. But, the biggest fear is that you're going to lose money, but it's really not that bad of a problem.
It's not,
you know what I mean? A lot of people put a lot of fear into that, but it's kind of, I think we make it a lot greater in our minds than it really is.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's mindset. It's how you evaluate your failures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I just try to look at it, okay, that's the cost of education.
Yeah, whenever that happened, Pete would call it our stupid tax. He's like, you know what? That's our fault for being lazy and not figuring it out before we did it.
And if you give up, then you really lose. Like if you don't try it again, that's when you really lose out.
And look, if you do 5 flips and 3 of them suck, but 2 of them make you a lot of money, I would count that as a win. Even if all 5 of them suck, but the 6th one is really good.
Made up for it all.
Yeah, you never know, right? You don't know. So let me ask you this, and then I want to ask you a little bit about what you're doing right now. When it comes to these kinds of flips, or you get investors, as well as I do, we'll talk to a new investor and I'll ask them, well, what do you want to focus on? And they go, I want to do it all. I'm like, well, you're going to suck at all of them. So you can't do that. You need to pick one, pick a lane. So I always try to tell investors, you need to focus on one thing and master that one thing. Whether you want to be the best at flipping or you want to be the best at wholesaling, I don't care what it is. Pick something, learn it before you even do a transaction, and then do the transaction once you know it. Now, I'm not saying analysis paralysis, but what is your thoughts on, being focused on one thing or trying to do a bunch of things especially when you're talking to an investor?
I think it's important to understand your personal, what is it in your bubble, your time, how much you can allocate towards something, what is your knowledge, area of expertise, how much are you willing to pay for that, or to who's in your network. So it all depends. I think focus is really important, but it's very difficult to do, especially when you have to have a certain understanding of how each thing works
Right.
in the marketplace. So I think once you've kind of got some general education about everything, it is good to pick a lane. But like if, let's say you pick wholesaling is where you want to focus and you do really well in it, you're going to come across these deals that like I can make a lot of money flipping.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then you do learn something new. So I would say focus on one thing. Once you've gotten a really good hold on that, then, you can
delve in.
Yeah, no,
and that's a good point because, when I tell people pick a lane, pick one lane, master it. Once you have that mastered, then you can pick another lane. But don't be trying to go across the freeway, lane to lane to lane without ever learning even how to drive. And that's, I think, a lot of investors is, I tell them, I say, unless you know what a good deal is for you, you're going to see everything as a good deal because you cannot identify what's a good deal and what's a bad deal because you're so busy changing lanes all the time. And you're they end up being the person that says, oh, there's no good deals out there. I can't find anything. It's like, well, what's a good deal to you? Yeah. They can't give you that definition, so they don't know. And I'm like, well, if you don't know, how would anyone else know? And, I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of what you do with investors because you work with a lot of investors. Now, is that your main thing, investors, or is it retail also?
I do retail and investors, but I think there is a certain skill set or like knowledge base when working with investors.
Sure.
So I find that I get a lot of referrals for other investor clients. So that's probably about 80% of the business that I do.
So the investors, I'd like to dispel some common myths. A lot of people think the investor is the guy who has 30, 40 houses. He's running around to Home Depot and doing all stuff. My experience has been that is not the average investor. And tell me if you agree or not. My experience of the average investor is they own 1 to 3 houses, maybe 5. They have full-time careers. They want them as an offset to their additional income for retirement purposes. They're really not interested in running around to Home Depot or doing all that stuff. Is that your experience? Or?
Yeah. So there's many definitions to an investor, but the ones that I typically work with are buy and hold. So they're looking to build up a portfolio for retirement.
Right.
And so they're looking for retail ready because they don't have the time to rehab a property,
desire, knowledge, any of that,
to find it, and they understand that the numbers are going to look a lot different. They're not going to purchase a house today and make $100,000 on this particular property this year. They're buying it for the long-term equity debt pay down, and they're conventional, like they finance their properties. They're not buying cash. They're taking the $100,000 they have, divide it, by 4 and buy 4 houses.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because a lot of times, personally, I've got a career and I've got the property management company. I don't see a good deal when someone says, oh man, I can get this deal for $30,000 and you can rehab it for $70 and it's going to be worth $150. I know the numbers, and the numbers may say it's a great deal, but that is just not something I want to do. I don't have the time to do it. I don't have the desire. I don't even have the knowledge really to go in and do all that stuff. It's just not. Could I do it? Absolutely. I could dig in and I could figure it out. And I mean, I have the knowledge to do it, but I don't want to go and learn about pulling permits with the city of Houston. That just doesn't excite me. I'd rather pay the end of price and say, just tell me when it's done. I don't mind if you make money, you make your money, I'm going to make my money on the long term, and we'll both go about our way. And I think the average investor is similar to myself. I think they're okay paying, not obviously nobody wants to pay retail, but they're okay paying more as long as it makes them some cash flow. But more importantly, it's going to go up in value. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people, they feel that when they get into this industry that they need to buy these $30,000, $40,000 houses like Pete and I did. Another story. But, a lot of people think that that's what they need to do and they need to learn about rehabbing and they need to, and I tell people that is the definition of a landlord, not an investor. So the definition of a landlord is a person that does it himself. They want to figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the definition of an investor is that buys an asset that returns money to them on a continual basis. Not saying that a property that you have to buy and rehab and all that can do that, but they need to think about what is the goal of why they're doing it. Right. And if your goal is to do all that and buy a rehab and spend your time doing that, then by all means do it. But a lot of times when you ask them, why are you even doing this? They don't really have an answer and they don't have a goal.
Yeah.
When you talk to, I know. Do you when you talk to investors, do you kind of educate them on that?
Yeah, which is something I learned from you, actually.
Yeah, well.
Sat in a couple of meetings with you and investors, but I think it's a really important place to start because I don't know what to look for. I can project my own goals onto someone else and say, hey, here's what I would do. But I mean, I think it's really important for them to take that 20-year view. Like, where do you see these transactions 20 years from now? Are you trying to hold? Is this the retirement plan? Yep. Do you need to replace a job right now?
Right. Because your strategy is going to change based on different set of goals. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I talk to investors about all the time, and I'm actually thinking of making a course on this because it seems to be so prevalent but so voided out there is, when you're getting involved in investing or even when you have a business, you've got to have a goal. You've got to have an end goal, and then you have to work that goal, mm-hmm. which is called a strategy, mm-hmm. to get there. And if you don't have a goal, the odds of you succeeding are going to be slim to none.
Right.
And if you don't have the right mindset when you're thinking of buying that property, as far as, you can make the money on cash flow, appreciation, depreciation, equity capture, or debt pay down. You can make it on all those things. But if you don't know what's the most important to you, you may go off the shiny object, which is cash flow. Mm-hmm. But if you have a regular career, cash flow is not even important to you.
Right.
But if
you don't need the $300 a month.
And when Pete and I started buying houses, we were going for these low income, high cash flow properties, which never materialized. But on paper, they were high cash flow properties. But the whole thing is if somebody would have asked me, hey, Steve, why are you buying these deals? Mm-hmm. You don't need the cash flow. You're an airline pilot. This doesn't make sense. I probably would not have bought as many as I did, mm-hmm. because I would have thought, yeah, that's a good point. Because I wanted them for retirement purposes, and those particular houses were not going to go up in value.
Right.
So it was totally contradictory to my goals.
Mm-hmm. You were probably spending more just turning them
oh
over
my gosh.
every month.
Yeah, that's
than what they're actually worth.
Watch episode number 1 if you want to hear our story. But anyways, so part of that is we created the owner education series through Empire Industries. And what we try to do is we want to educate investors to just become better buyers. And, at these events, we have our Empire Realtors there. We have Noble Mortgages there talking about how to fund deals. Senna House Buyers is there trying to educate you on how to actually get a good deal. I'm even going to have my son at this one, which you actually were the one that leased the property for him. 14 years old, bought his first rental property. But these are the things we want to educate. And, as we close up the show, I would tell you that if you want to educate yourself, this is the place you want to go. If you're not local, go to our Facebook group, Landlord Survival Group. Go in there, look at the comments. I'm always putting free stuff on there about tips and tricks about evictions and how to get your property ready to lease and those kind of things for people in the group. Or go to our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com. You can look at our Ultimate Landlord Survival Handbook that's on there. We just have a lot of things for investors to educate you. So Rachel, if somebody wants to get a hold of you and they want to talk to you about investing, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
2 ways, mainly email and phone number. My email is rallenrealty@gmail.com. That's RALLENREALTY@gmail.com. And my phone number is 832-390-4305.
And I'm sure you're on Facebook?
I am on Facebook, Rachel Allen Real Estate.
There we go. And if you want to know more about the property management, you can go to EmpireIndustriesLLC.com or go to our Facebook group, Empire Industries LLC. We have a ton of information. We are in the Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and opening up the Austin area as well. So we just have a lot of stuff, a lot of education. I mean, we are a full knowledge-based company that just continually tries to increase knowledge for investors. Because again, I don't think there's enough of that out there, and I'm really trying to push that as much as I can. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you have a tip for people?
A tip. For
investors.
For investors. I have so many.
I'll take one.
But, I think, again, start with mindset. Before you can do anything, you have to understand, what's going on in your own head. You have to kind of resolve some things because at the end of the day, it's kind of a scary thing to understand if you're going to put, your livelihood on the line to try to make it better. you're going to fail.
Yeah, very true.
But it's about what you do with that failure in order to like keep moving forward. You can fail and quit, or you can learn and keep going.
There you go. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening. This is Steve Rosenberg and Rachel Allen with the Landlord Survival Show. We will see you next week. Rachel, thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.